Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Oh, hold on one second. No worries. Oh, let me mute my phone. That would not have been good. You ready? Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. I am going to call this the evaluation team committee member meeting to order. So thank you all so very much for being here. We are missing two of our members, but hopefully one will be able to come shortly. So I do want to remind the committee members to please speak clearly into your microphones. This is being recorded. We have had some feedback that it is difficult for some people to understand what we're saying. So that's just one quick reminder for everybody. Let's move forward. I would like for us to approve the agenda for today's meeting. So I hope you all have had an opportunity to review the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve?
Madam, I motion to approve the minutes.
Awesome. Second. Okay, so our agenda is now approved. Thank you all so very much. Let's move to the next item, which will be public comment. Ms. Maffei, do we have any?
No, Madam Chair.
No comments, no public comments. Okay, moving right along. All right. Thank you all so very much. Okay, we have an important job to do today. We are going to be looking at the rankings for the ITN responses that have come in. Before we get started and having a conversation about this, I would like to ask Mr. Springer to please talk to us a little bit about the timing and some of the technical issues that we should be considering as we look into finalizing these evaluations and selecting some people to go forward for negotiations.
I have a presentation.
Okay, that'll be great.
So good afternoon. Thank you for having me. It's Fred Springer with Bryant Miller Olive, outside counsel for CSC Leon. So in this ITN invitation to negotiate evaluation process, this is the procurement process to contract with an outside private firm to do the needs assessment. So that document was published some months ago. This language is from that document just to kind of set the table for what's happening today if people are, this is your first visit. So what's already happened is there's been an evaluation team appointed, of which you are members. You evaluation team members have independently evaluated responses. So we've done that. Holly has been sort of the procurement contact. So she's gotten your individual feedback and will present that today as we move forward the meeting. So that's overall what we're here for. So the key for this team today, this is what the ITN says, is the team will establish a competitive range of responses reasonably susceptible of award. And I'll tell you a little bit more about what that means in a second. And then the team will decide which one or more respondents in that range will advance to the negotiation phase. So process-wise, there's another phase after this, which is the negotiation team. And that negotiation team is charged with taking the firms that this team advances to them and negotiating with them next week and reducing that to a recommendation of award, which goes to the full council at its next meeting in 2 weeks. So this is procurement jargon. I would say the one thing, and I'll come back and circle at the end, but that you should focus on is the team decides one or more of respondents in that range. That's probably the most important words on this slide, is one or more. And that's a unique feature of Florida procurement law, and that's in the council's procurement manual and also in the ITN. So what does all this mean? Before we get down to the details, I thought of how can we make this clear? So I'll use this as a sort of an example. Imagine we have to get to Tampa. We're sitting in Tallahassee. We want to get to Tampa, right? So that's the problem. Instead of trying to get a needs assessment contractor, you're trying to get to Tampa. So how could we do that? Well, you can go to, Google Maps. And if you're familiar with the little blue menu there, right, when you look at your phone, and Apple has something similar, your means of transportation. So here I've clicked on walking. So when we're talking about competitive range, think of it as walking, right? Like theoretically, it's possible that you could get to Tampa by walking, but it takes 80 hours and it's a long walk and it's raining and we don't have the time to do that. So we really aren't going to think about walking to Tampa. We're not going to take a hot air balloon. We're not going to swim or anything like that. So things that theoretically could work, but they're outside the competitive range, there's no way we're ever going to do it. That's how to think about the competitive range, okay? The other thing to think about, we got 8 responses, did an initial review, they're all responsive, so you got 8 to choose from. It's not like someone said, I want to go to Pensacola or I want to go to Atlanta. So everyone's saying, I'll get you to Tampa. So your job is, and you have looked at each of them to say how they're going to get you to Tampa. If anyone said walking, that's what we mean by they're outside the competitive range. They're not susceptible of award. There's no way we would ever contract with them. All right. Well, what about flying, right? Maybe we fly instead of walking. So if we pick another thing on the menu there, you click on the airplane and you get an option. And that looks pretty good. It's 70 minutes and costs you $230. Maybe we want to fly. Now, Google doesn't present every option, right? So if you decide, I don't want to walk, I want to fly, then you think, oh, how many different ways can I fly, right? And if you look beyond Google, you see, you can go to Delta's website and they'll get you there for $900 in, 4 hours. You could go to the private thing and get an private plane for $3,600. So if you decide I want to fly and you narrow it down to that, then you've got a range of choices about how am I going to fly there. Okay? What if you don't like flying? Well, it's COVID and we don't want to be in a small enclosed space with other people and whatnot. So we're not going to fly. We're going to drive. Well, if you click on the driving link there, Google presents you with 3 different ways. And there's more than that, but they've narrowed it down to 3 different ways to get there. So each one of these is aimed at your ultimate goal of getting to Tampa. If you're determined to drive, here's 3 choices. So what Google does, if you do the little recommended travel mode, which most people do because your phone defaults to that, is it shows you a variety of options. And then the 2 main ones being driving or flying. It doesn't show you every driving option and it doesn't show you every flying option. It sort of sorts through them and says, flying might be of interest to most people, driving might be of interest to most people. So I'm going to present, to make it easy, just those 3 choices, right? And then even then you've got, even if you drive, do I rent a car, do I drive my own car? You can make choices. But this is key because in the responses that we got 8. You could say some are more like flying and some are more like driving, right? Because they're different firms. They bring different skill sets and different approaches to the work. So if you decide we're determined to fly and we're only going to look at those firms that are proposing to fly, then the ones that are driving, even though they're in the competitive range, you're kind of back to this step. I'm only going to look at those that fly, right? If you determine, I don't want to fly, I'm only going to look at those who are proposing to drive, then you're looking at something like this, right? If you want to mix it up and say, well, I want the best of the flight options, which is what Google gives you here. There's other flight options. I'm going to get the best of the flight options. I'm going to get the best of the driving options and present those. That's how Google's artificial intelligence works, right? So you guys are called on not to be artificially intelligent, but actually, really humanly intelligent. And we're not going to Tampa, right? So this is the goal that we're trying to get to, which is the purpose that was included in the statement of work that a needs assessment committee did. So this is the target that we have in mind. This is where we're trying to get. There are multiple ways to get there, and you've reviewed each of them. You've scored them against the ITN evaluation criteria, right? So that's how we get the number ranking. Today, you're really comparing them to one another because you're saying, okay, of all these choices, I'm going to take one or more and present it to the negotiation team. So if in theory, you could reduce it to one and present it to the negotiation team. You could say they're all in the competitive range and, present all 8 of them if you wanted. Practically, that won't work because the goal is to have the negotiation team negotiate a contract next week so the council can approve it, so the work can be done by next spring when the council needs to make the decisions that it needs this work product to base its decisions on. But this is what you're trying to do. You will narrow it down. So your recommended options, this is what the negotiation team will do with them. If you look ahead, what happens to your work after this, they've got to take the firms that you give them and make a decision, a recommendation of award based on a little bit different criteria than you used when you were scoring them. So these are the award criteria. So when you're deciding which options to present to the team, just bear in mind that these are the criteria that the negotiation team is going to use. So this is what will form the basis of the final recommendation. And best value is defined in the ITN. It's the expected outcome of the contract that provides the greatest overall benefit in response to the ITN requirements. So again, always the goal is what's the best way to meet the ITN requirements. So the goal in this meeting is you're going to see your scores, the aggregate of all of the scores, and it'll be very numerical. There'll be a high score, next high score, et cetera, and go down. And then you have to decide which one or more of those firms to present to the negotiation team to complete its work. And again, some of you may feel, darn it, I want to fly, and some of you may feel, I'm never going to fly, we have to drive. Your job today is to kind of work through those things. There's no right answer, but the right answer is the one that you reach consensus on. You can take, like Google does, the best flying option and the best driving option and present those. You can say, no, we're going to fly. You can say, no, we're going to drive. You've got a lot of latitude as you exercise your responsibility. So that's the overall process. I don't know if you have any questions or if you just want to get on and see the scores.
I'm ready to see the
Good,
scores. But let
okay.
me ask, do we have any other questions from any of you? Absolutely. Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
So I guess that's my cue.
Yes, ma'am.
First, I kind of wanted to say, like, just in terms of doing this, looking at numbers and kind of diving into it and playing around with numbers makes me literally happier than a pig in mud because I love data and I love numbers. And I think that at my heart of hearts, that's where I'm at. So this is, I don't want to say it's like the most fun part of the job, but like looking at the numbers and finding trends and all of that was something that I quite enjoyed doing. So you'll find in your packet on page 4 is the breakdown. And the way that it's presented, I just want to walk through how it's presented on your sheet for you, is in the order, it's presented in the order of the total scores in kind of a rank order, if you will, based on the compilation of all 5 of the evaluation team members submitting it. So we have all of the backup and we aggregated the numbers and kind of rolled them all in so that you kind of see those totals. But I want to just kind of explore some of the trends that we saw in looking at it. Clearly, so what you see here is basically a short version of this. And what we noticed in total was a 96-point spread between the highest score and the lowest score. And in looking at those numbers, there appeared to be 2 to 3 natural breaks. And the first one, just kind of glancing at it, you might see that the difference between the top 4, the top score and the bottom 4 and the top 4 is 39 points. And same thing for the second quadrant. The top score in the second quadrant and the bottom quadrant, 39 points. But within that kind of mix, after you get beyond like kind of the spread, if you will, 16 points between the top score down to the second one, down to not a difference of 9, 14, 15. And then you have that real jump. So there's a lot more similarity where that line is drawn before there is anywhere else. However, the difference between number 4 and number 5 is a little bit smaller than that kind of that bigger jump of 71 down to 56 is not the 39-point jump, it's only 15. So it's comparable. So if you're looking at a place to draw a line, you might draw it in that first place or in that second place. Another way that we wanted to kind of look at it, though, is not just looking at the total points, right? We understood that everything was weighted differently and in previous conversations by the evaluation committee or by the full needs assessment committee. Two of the things that we really pointed out was the service description, which had the highest possible points of 45, and the specialized expertise. While that was on par in terms of point weighting with the regular qualifications, in conversations, we all kind of agreed that that was really where we wanted to hone in on with some of the work. So these are the total scores looking at it from that way, and respectively, a 66-point spread with service description, 22-point spread with the specialized expertise. And there's kind of 2 or 3 tiers again that are emerging.
Excuse me,
this-
Holly.
Mhm.
Will you please take your mask off for me? Thank you. Yes,
That better?
better. Thank you.
Okay. So within service description, we have a kind of a natural break again after that 4th one. One could argue that within each of the differences, it's less than 10 points between each of the others. But if you kind of drop down further, you see it starts to change a little bit beyond that. However, there's one could also argue that there's a greater than 10-point spread between, again, the first one and the second one, which is why we kind of drew 2 lines. One might argue that there's really 3 tiers with that one as opposed to just 2. Within the specialized expertise, using that same rationale of a 10-point spread, it drops down to 2 different tiers with the line kind of again being after that 5th one. So again, how you want to draw the lines is certainly up to this committee. And of course, there's other things to consider as well. One of the things that we also wanted to look at is from individual scoring amongst all 5 of the evaluators, if an entity was ranked the highest or the lowest. And so we put this together to show some of that kind of natural tiering where you have kind of your highest folks where the first 4 were ranked at the highest, and then none of the bottom 4 got a high ranking, and another natural tiering with the 2 at the bottom actually scoring as the lowest almost consistently across all 5 evaluators. However, there was a little bit of a wild card with that one, again, right in the middle, which is what one would naturally expect. Some rise to the top, some fall to the bottom, and then you have some ambiguity right there in the middle. I wanted to kind of just point that out as well.
Yeah, please.
So Holly, are you saying that, for example, the public consulting group, out of the evaluators, 2 of them scored at the highest?
That is correct.
Okay.
I'm going to show you a few more graphs, and just to give you a whole bunch of data, and then we'll just go back to the basic, and then we can go back and forth between all of them based on your questions. So this, we again dove into the service description and wanted to show, so each of the series represents a single evaluator. And one of the things that oftentimes one could do is, are any of these at a level where all 5, kind of like if you were to set a minimum standard that all 5 say that, yes, they're in. So if you draw the line at 25 points, you'll see that 3 of the respondents scored a 25 or higher by all 5 evaluators. In the kind of second tier, if you will, if you were to look at all but 1 scored a 25 or higher, you'll have, again, that 4th column of the 4th respondent. Then if you kind of progress, and you'll actually pull in the 7th respondent if you were to use that as kind of your rule of thumb. Number 4 and number 7 would pop in as scoring a 25 or higher. But you can also see that if you were to say it down to 2, where all but 2 scored, then they would all be in. Kind of where you decide to draw the line. But you can clearly see from here, 25 or higher, you have 3 that meet that by all 5. Similarly, we looked at the specialized expertise. What is that kind of least common denominator amongst all of the respondents? And you'll see in this case, it's around the I mean, technically it's 10.8 if you were to average it, maybe around that 11 mark. You have, again, the top three that hit where all five meet that and that expectation or higher. And it also pulls in then number 5, respondent number 5. If you were to extend it down and say all but one, it would then bring 2 more in, number 4 and 3 more, number 4, number 6, and number 7. So again, in this case, if you were to just draw the line at all 5 had some sort of consensus, again, you have these top 3, and then you have one more that pops in here. These are different ways of looking at just the data side from a quantitative perspective, reflecting all of your qualitative analysis. So I'm going to come back up to this one, and which is kind of where we started, and just which is reflected again on this page, where you kind of see some natural tiering with those top 3 consistently, no matter kind of how you cut the data, they are consistently at the top. With respondent number 4 and respondent number 5, I'm going to call it in the gray area. And not consistently for the bottom ones, but they tend to be, the 3 that are at the bottom do tend to be at the bottom more regularly than the others.
I do have a question for you. One thing, as I was reviewing these proposals, there were a lot of opportunities for references to be contacted. I know that you had an opportunity to talk to them. That means a lot to me. So given the fact that we have the top 3 or the top 4 consistently, can you give me some feedback as to what those references said in general? You don't have to give me details, but in general, especially with the top tier of aggregate responses.
Sure. So you'll recall in the ITN items 6 and 7 in the qualifications asked specifically, do they have previous experience working with a Children's Services Council or a county seeking to start a Children's Services Council? And then the second question was, do you have experience doing a human needs assessment in a Florida community?
Right.
Or as it turns out, all of them have some experience in either one of those questions. So we called the references listed for those and not the personal references, right? We all know that if you list someone as a personal reference, you call them, they're going to give you glowing feedback. We were very interested in, you did work with these people. They listed you as almost like work experience. How has that experience been? Every callback and email that we have received has been positive for every single entity that's listed here who's called back. There are a handful who have not called back, so I don't have responses for them. Those that have not called back are in the lower ranking in the second half in terms of I haven't heard back from them. I'm sure that they're busy. For those that are in that consistently in the top, all of the feedback has been great, but I will also say, and for some of them, specifically, I'll speak to the public consulting group, which is at the top. There was a lot of experience. They have worked with, I believe it's 7, maybe 8 different communities. I have not heard from all of them. Similarly with Q&Q research, having that same experience. If you were to kind of rank in terms of order of who has the most experience, PCG is definitely at the top of that list, and Q&Q would actually come second, whereas George Washington, they have not worked with the CSC previously, but they have done human needs assessment type work actually here in this community with the Leon County Department of Health. So all positive feedback that I've received at this point, but it's not concluded.
Okay, so for the top, when we look at the top, that's 4 that are on this list, do you have more than one response for a reference with positive feedback on each one of those organizations?
I do not.
No, okay.
I have at least one
Okay.
for all of them.
Okay, but not more than one. Okay, thank you. Any other questions?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, please.
So are any of the bottom 4, did any of the members rank them as their top?
For the bottom 4?
Yes.
No.
Okay, I wanted to go back. Okay.
If you're looking at highest and lowest, the wild card I would say is respondent 3.
Okay, it's good to know.
And I'm happy to put up any of these again.
Yeah, thank you. I was like, I need a copy of this. Okay, thank you. You have a question? Okay, she's ready to vote. Okay, thank you very
Okay.
much. We really appreciate that. Okay, let's see. Okay, guys, it's time for us to do some work. So we saw, will you please, okay, go back to your
Yeah.
slides and yeah, leave it right there. I think that's gonna be
This
very
is the
helpful
one?
for us. Yeah, leave it
Okay.
right there. Okay.
I'll hang here just in case you want to flip back and forth.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay, when I got this copy, and I'm referring to this copy, everybody, from Holly yesterday, and I was able to look at this, and especially now having looking at the data that Holly has provided for us, I'm ready to shorten this list pretty significantly. My natural response is we had 8. We have seen consistently those that are at the top 4. I am willing to at least cut the bottom 4 and have conversations and discussions around the top 4 is what I would like to propose. I'm even willing to cut down to 3, but I want to get some feedback from all of you. I do think there's going to be a lot of conversation, but especially after seeing Holly's information, I'm comfortable narrowing this down to let's have some conversations around either the top 3 or top 4. I'd like to get your feedback on that. What are your thoughts?
Ms. McFadden, can you turn on your microphone? Thank you.
I agree with you. There's a clear delineation on the top ones. I actually rank these exactly in the same order on the top 3, not number 4.
Okay.
And so I feel strongly that the top 3 should definitely be considered. The number 4 group was really a marketing firm that kind of bridged people together. I didn't feel it was nearly as strong. So I would support your recommendation of the top 3.
Okay. How do you feel?
I agree with that as well. I would advocate to include the 4th one, just based on the partners that they were using. I thought that from reading that proposal, that they were a strong contender if they were to use those partners based on their experience in the community. But that would be my only application for the 4th one.
Okay. So how about this? Let's agree to knock off the bottom 4 off the bat. Okay. So I'm just going to cross them off of my list for right now. And then we can have a conversation around the top 4. And then at the end of today, then we will determine if we're going to move forward with 3 or 4 with regards to negotiations. Is everybody comfortable with that? Okay. Sounds good. All right. So we are down to Public Consulting Group, George Washington, Q&Q, and then Downs. Is it St. Germain? I kept on saying German, but I knew that wasn't right. Okay. All right. So we are down to the top 4 that we have here on this list. So what I do want to talk a little bit about as we looked at these different proposals, there are a couple of things that we need to determine what's very important to us and what are the things that we're going to weigh higher than others. So for example, I think you saw a lot of value in the fact that especially number 4 was a local company. So we have to determine if we are going to put a lot of value into having someone that's local here, or if we're going to really want someone who is outside of Tallahassee or Leon County, really looking at this and providing some fresh eyes to give us a new perspective. Another thing that was very important to me was community engagement as a part of this body of work. And do we see that as something that's very important that we want to look at to ensure that there is ample support for community engagement? I think analytics, also data analytics, was also very important across the board. So is that something that we want to put on the table for strong consideration? So I guess my question to the rest of you, I kind of laid out the things that were important to me. As I was thinking about, as I was reviewing this, what else do you all think were very important to you that no matter who we land on, these are things that you are wanting to make sure we consider strongly for the negotiations part?
Well, Madam Chair, I too had these same actual points that I felt were important. I also thought that the actual cost proposal was important. What some of them were able to articulate that they would be able to produce, and that tied into their proposal of how much the cost was. and the quality of their presentation, those weighed heavily.
So cost.
Yes.
Okay, cost was important to you. Okay. Anything else?
No.
Yours. Okay, all right, fair enough. Liza, as you kind of looked through these and considering, what we've already shared, what were things that were extremely important to you that you were looking for?
Okay, so I would say the opposite. I actually think coming from outside of Tallahassee and having expertise nationally was something I was looking for more than the local group. So I think a national sort of perspective because of just all the ideas they could bring in. I also thought that some of these top two had some fantastic ideas about how to engage the community.
Yes.
And how to go out, not just do focus groups, but actually bring them in a very, very thoughtful way. So for me, that engagement at the local level and how they were going to go about doing that was very thought out. And then there was also a philosophy that each of the top three had, where they were basing what they were doing on research and in a very thoughtful, prescriptive way to get to an ROI at the end. So those are sort of the things that I was looking at.
Okay, this is good. And I think we are basically in alignment with almost everything except for the location of the group that we want to see as a part of this. Yeah, I know that you have some experience with regards to reviewing proposals and things like that. And I'd love to hear your perspective too. Why is it so important to you that we have an organization? What are the values that you see for having an organization outside of Leon County completing this work? What are the true benefits that you think are things we should be considering?
So I don't know if it's so much that they're outside of Tallahassee as the group that was from within Tallahassee didn't have the national experience.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, that
So
makes
had it been a national organization that had done this many
National.
places, but they were based here. So it wasn't an issue of, are you from Tallahassee? It was an issue of, do you have that broad swath of experience?
Okay. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, sure. So even though I found in favor, or a positive, should I say, that some of them were local, I'm on the same page as Ms. McFadden. So some of the scoring that I came up with, I may have been, oh, okay, this is great to have local experience. But then, and I had a question for Mr. Springer.
Yeah.
So are we allowed to specifically identify like who may have been our top three and articulate why?
Yeah, so the purpose.
Fred, can you turn on your microphone? Oh, sorry, Mr. Springer. I do apologize.
The purpose of today is to vet this and make sure you can reach consensus as a group. So you need to create the record that supports your decision. So don't make it based on like unexpressed grounds. You want to use today to lay out the grounds for that. And again, if I could just go, Dr. Glenn, is, the ITN had the weights. So when you did your individual scoring, and those are the weights, the math that apply to what you're looking at now. So again, the service description, like Holly said, was almost half, that was 45 points. And then the specialized expertise was another 20. So that right there, was 65 points. So that was the exercise to decide, that when we had the range, who's in the top four. Now you can go into as a group and comparing to one another, what's going to be most important to ultimate success? Is it data collection or is it data analysis? Is it I've done something like this 10 times right here in Tallahassee, or I've done this same exact thing, never in Tallahassee, but 10 times somewhere else. Those are the kind of things that I'd encourage you to
talk about
today.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. And I'm sorry, I'm going to come to you in a minute.
Okay.
That's why I thought it was very important for us to identify the things that were most important to us. And I do think I have a pretty good list of what that is. And now I do think we should go back and look at these proposals and kind of figure out, so based on our, the things that are important to us, how do we go back and then look at those top four and determine, do we keep them at the top four? And Holly, if you can go back to the top four slide for me, please. Thank you. The top four, or do we narrow this down even further? Okay. So Terrence, do you want to start? Would you like to
Sure.
kind of review?
Sure. So I want to speak back to the local piece, and my top three were actually public consulting group. My second was actually Downs and St. Germain Research, and then my third was actually Q&Q Research Consultants. And I'm going to start with Q&Q Research Consultants because of the local piece, and the diversity piece. I was very impressed by the diversity of the group and their organization. And then they also had a lot of experience with completing similar types of assessments in local communities. And so, and I thought their proposal was done very well. And I felt that if they were advanced, that they would be a strong contender that would be able to meet the needs of the needs assessment. However, then with the actual Downs and St. Germain research, I had these same concerns expressed about, just the actual company itself. But then when I realized who they were going to partner with to actually, fulfill the agreement of the actual assessment, and I reviewed that information, I thought it was a strong point that they had such a strong local tie to the community, which could possibly give them a head start as far as once the needs assessment, is conducted, they have all these other resources that they've been a part of in the community with other partners, and that would possibly give them a leg up. But then my first choice, public consulting group, once I saw how large they were, I was originally kind of turned off, but then when I was reviewing, it kind of was a moot point because they were so organized. It was so well put together that even though they were such a large corporation, they were designed to, in my opinion, produce the results at a reasonable cost, for this needs assessment. I just thought they had the experience to do that and strong organizational and structure to do that. So that's where I landed with that. So yes, the local was great, but then again, the public consulting group showed me didn't necessarily have to be local.
Okay. So it sounds like you're comfortable with the top three based on the comments that I'm just hearing.
Yes, I am. I just definitely wanted to put in that plug in there for the St. Germain, even though they weren't, they definitely had a strong contender that they were going to partner with.
Okay, sounds good. Liza, I want to hear from you.
Okay, well, I think I mentioned earlier, ranked them public consulting number one. By far, I think you hit the nail on the head. Their alignment with their research and their ability to map out how they were going to do everything was the clearest by far. It was extremely impressive. I ranked George Washington University number two. I was very impressed with their, also with their research and the way that they went about thinking through it from an analytical standpoint. Q&Q, almost every answer, they use past client dialogue. So I found it very challenging to follow their narrative. However, they had very good embedded pieces. But the narrative doesn't jump out and say, hey, Leon County Children's Services Council, we are aligning our knowledge and expertise for you. Instead, you had to assume they were going to do that based on what they said about other groups. Like, I just didn't feel like they were rubbing, hugging me, right? It was like, okay, you did everything, but it, it felt like the first two really, really understood and had spent a lot of time researching the community. And number three was pretty good. So those top three. Number four, Downs and St. Germain, I ranked, I think maybe as my lowest, to be honest.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
And that was, I went to their website. They didn't have a single human services connection on there. It was very much about marketing. It was on generating new revenue, finance planning, et cetera. And then the group that they were bringing in, not the, forget the name of the group, it was a national children's group, is a nonprofit. And the benefit potentially of putting them in the pile to be considered is that in an ITN process, you could then say, oh, look, there was this group that's a pro bono partner with you. We could move them, we recommend to whoever does this, that group be included, if in fact we think that they add that much value. So, I do think you have to think about what the process is. But again, overall, I think there were some good partners in there. I just didn't think their strategy put them in the top tier.
Okay, that's interesting. Okay, so my top four are also the top four, but totally different domain or order. I really liked Down St. Germain, simply because of their community connections. And I felt as if they would start on the ground immediately, and they already had the connections with the community. They were already partnered with a lot of the asset providers that were here in Leon County. And I thought that gave them a good grounding to do it. I also liked the language that they had in there about community engagement in some of, especially the minority communities in Leon County. Given that, the thing that I worried about was, sometimes it's just not always best to have someone who's been in the kitchen cooking the meal, because they won't see things from a fresh perspective. And the fact that what they've always done is they may always do it. And we already have the assessment that the Whole Child Leon brought forward. I wanted something new and different. So that's the one